Marcus Thompson adjusted his Italian silk tie one final time before stepping out of his black Mercedes. The downtown community center looked nothing like the country clubs and corporate boardrooms he was used to. Graffiti covered the brick walls, and the parking lot had more potholes than actual pavement. He wondered what his father would say about this unconventional business venture. At 28, Marcus had inherited Thompson Industries, a multi-million-dollar construction empire built by 3 generations of his family. He had everything money could buy: a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, a collection of luxury cars, and a social circle filled with other wealthy young professionals. Yet something felt missing. The board meetings, charity galas, and country club dinners had become predictable and hollow. The idea for this experiment came during a late-night conversation with his college friend David, now a social worker. David had challenged Marcus about living in a bubble, never understanding how the other half lived. "You write checks to charity but never actually meet the people you're supposedly helping," David had said. "You think money solves everything, but you have no idea what real struggle looks like." Those words stung because they rang true. Marcus decided to prove David wrong by volunteering at the community center in one of the city's toughest neighborhoods. He told himself it would be temporary, just long enough to show he could connect with people from different backgrounds. He never imagined this decision would completely change the direction of his life. The community center director, Mrs. Rodriguez, greeted him with obvious skepticism. She had seen wealthy volunteers before. They usually lasted a week before the reality of urban poverty sent them running back to their comfortable lives. She assigned Marcus to help with the after-school program, figuring he would quit after dealing with a room full of energetic kids from troubled homes. On his first day, Marcus felt completely out of place. His expensive clothes and polished appearance made him stand out like a peacock among pigeons. The children stared at him with curious eyes, whispering among themselves about the fancy man who talked differently than anyone they knew. Some were openly suspicious, having learned early that adults with money usually wanted something in return for their help. But Marcus surprised everyone, including himself, by returning the next day. And the day after that, he began learning the children's names, their stories, and their struggles. There was 8-year-old Jamal, whose mother worked 3 jobs just to keep their lights on. There was 12-year-old Maria, who took care of her younger siblings while her father recovered from a construction accident. Each child carried burdens that Marcus had never imagined possible. The work was harder than any corporate deal he had ever negotiated. These kids didn't care about his family name or his bank account. They wanted consistency, attention, and genuine care, things that money couldn't buy. When little Jamal struggled with his homework, Marcus found himself staying late to help, forgetting about dinner reservations at 5-star restaurants. 3 weeks into his volunteer work, Marcus met someone who would challenge everything he thought he knew about success, happiness, and love. She walked into the community center wearing scrubs from her job at the local clinic, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, carrying a box of donated medical supplies. She moved with purpose and confidence, greeting the children by name and checking on their bumps and bruises with genuine concern. Her name was Alicia Martinez, and she was everything Marcus wasn't. She had grown up in this very neighborhood, worked her way through nursing school while supporting her younger brother, and spent her free time giving back to the community that had raised her. When Mrs. Rodriguez introduced them, Alicia's handshake was firm, her smile polite but guarded. She had sized him up immediately, another rich boy playing at charity work. Marcus found himself thinking about Alicia long after he returned to his penthouse that night. There was something about her quiet strength and unwavering dedication that fascinated him. She seemed to accomplish more with limited resources than he did with unlimited wealth. The children obviously adored her, and the other volunteers looked to her for guidance and support. Over the following weeks, Marcus began timing his volunteer hours to coincide with Alicia's visits to the center. He told himself it was because she was an effective teacher, showing him how to really connect with the kids. But truthfully, he was drawn to her in a way he had never experienced before. The women in his social circle were beautiful and accomplished, but they all seemed to blend together. Similar backgrounds, similar goals, similar conversations about fashion and social events. Alicia was different. She spoke passionately about healthcare reform and educational inequality. She knew every family in the neighborhood and their struggles. When she smiled, it reached her eyes in a way that seemed impossible to fake. She challenged his assumptions without being confrontational, asking questions that made him think about his privilege and responsibilities in new ways. The turning point came during a particularly difficult afternoon at the center. One of the older kids, 16-year-old Carlos, had been arrested for spray painting an abandoned building. The other children were upset and confused, having looked up to Carlos as a big brother figure. Marcus watched as Alicia gathered them in a circle, helping them process their feelings while explaining the difference between artistic expression and vandalism. As Marcus witnessed her patience and wisdom in handling the situation, he realized he was falling for someone completely outside his world, someone who might never fit into his life of country clubs and corporate galas, someone who might not even want to. Alicia Martinez wiped down the examination table in the small clinic where she worked, her mind wandering to the strange developments at the community center. For months now, Marcus Thompson had been showing up consistently and she couldn't figure out his angle. In her experience, rich people didn't stick around the neighborhood unless they wanted something. Tax write-offs, photo opportunities, or a story to tell at their fancy dinner parties. She had grown up 3 blocks from the community center in a cramped apartment above her grandmother's bakery. Her father had left when she was 10, leaving her mother to raise Alicia and her younger brother Diego on a seamstress's salary. Every dollar had been counted twice. Every decision weighed against their limited resources. Alicia learned early that people with money lived in a different world, one where problems could be solved with a phone call or a check. Yet Marcus seemed genuinely committed to the kids at the center. She watched him struggle through his first weeks, clearly uncomfortable but determined to learn. Unlike other wealthy volunteers who maintained a careful distance from the children's problems, Marcus got involved. When Jamal's mother couldn't afford school supplies, Marcus quietly provided them without making a big show of his generosity. When Maria worried about her father's medical bills, Marcus connected the family with resources at the hospital where Alicia worked. What puzzled Alicia most was how Marcus treated her. The wealthy men she encountered through her work at the clinic usually spoke to her with condescending politeness, if they acknowledged her at all. They assumed she was someone to be helped rather than someone with valuable insights and skills. Marcus, however, asked for her opinions and actually listened to her answers. He deferred to her experience with the children and seemed genuinely interested in learning about their community. Still, Alicia kept her guard up. She had learned to be suspicious of people who had never struggled for anything, suddenly taking interest in her world. Her best friend Carmen, who worked as a teacher at the local elementary school, constantly warned her about getting too comfortable around Marcus. "Men like that don't stay in neighborhoods like ours," Carmen would say. "He's probably got a girlfriend in some mansion across town." The first crack in Alicia's carefully maintained distance came during a particularly busy evening at the center. A water pipe had burst in the basement, flooding the main activity room where the children usually did their homework. With nowhere else to go, 30 kids were crammed into the small kitchen area, making concentration impossible. Alicia arrived to find chaos, children crying, volunteers overwhelmed, and Mrs. Rodriguez on the phone with a plumber who couldn't come until the next day. Marcus appeared at her elbow, rolling up the sleeves of what looked like a very expensive shirt. "What do you need me to do?" he asked simply. No complaints about the mess, no suggestions that they cancel activities for the day, just a willingness to help solve the problem. Together, they organized the children into smaller groups, moving some to the library area and others to the unused office space upstairs. Marcus proved surprisingly good at keeping the younger kids entertained, while Alicia helped the older ones with their assignments. When little Sophia started crying because her math homework was soggy from the flood, Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, patiently working through each problem until she understood. Watching him interact with Sophia, Alicia felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't performed charity or manufactured kindness. Marcus genuinely cared about these children, and they were beginning to trust him in return. When Sophia threw her arms around Marcus's neck in gratitude, Alicia saw tears in his eyes that he quickly blinked away. After the children were picked up by their families, Marcus insisted on staying to help clean up the flooded basement. He waded through ankle-deep water in his obviously expensive shoes, hauling out damaged furniture and equipment without a single complaint. His shirt was soaked, his hair messy, and his usually perfect appearance completely disheveled. Somehow he looked more attractive than ever. "You don't have to do this," Alicia told him as they carried a waterlogged bookshelf up the stairs. "Mrs. Rodriguez said the maintenance crew will handle the heavy stuff tomorrow." Marcus paused, adjusting his grip on his end of the bookshelf. "These kids need this place," he said. "If we can get it cleaned up tonight, they won't miss any more program time." He looked directly at her, his eyes serious. "Besides, I'm learning that sometimes the most important work happens when no one's watching." That comment stayed with Alicia for days. She began paying closer attention to Marcus's interactions with the children and other volunteers. She noticed how he remembered details about their lives, asking Jamal about his mother's new job, congratulating Maria on her improved grades, bringing Diego's favorite candy when he stopped by to walk her home from the center. Gradually, Alicia found herself looking forward to the evenings when Marcus volunteered. Their conversations shifted from polite small talk to deeper discussions about the challenges facing their community. Marcus asked thoughtful questions about healthcare access, educational disparities, and economic inequality. He didn't offer simple solutions or suggest that money could fix everything. Instead, he listened and learned, acknowledging the complexity of problems he had never considered before. The moment Alicia realized her feelings had changed came during a community meeting about a proposed development project. A large corporation wanted to buy several blocks of the neighborhood to build luxury condominiums, promising to relocate current residents to comparable housing elsewhere. Most of the community saw this as another attempt to push poor families out of increasingly valuable real estate. Marcus attended the meeting, sitting quietly in the back row while residents voiced their concerns. When the developer's representative finished his presentation, Marcus stood up. Alicia expected him to support the project. After all, he was part of the same wealthy class that would benefit from gentrification. Instead, Marcus asked pointed questions about the relocation promises, the timeline for construction, and the impact on local businesses. His questions revealed flaws in the development plan that most residents hadn't considered. When the meeting ended, several community members approached Marcus, thanking him for his insights and asking for his advice on how to protect their interests. Walking home together after the meeting, Alicia finally voiced the question that had been bothering her for months. "Why are you really here, Marcus? What do you want from us?" Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her under the glow of a streetlight. His expression was more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. "Honestly, I started volunteering because I wanted to prove something to a friend. I thought I could show him that I understood people from different backgrounds." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "But somewhere along the way, this place became more real to me than anything in my old life. These kids, this community, you've all taught me what actually matters." His honesty caught Alicia off guard. She had expected a polished answer, something safe and charitable. Instead, Marcus had revealed something genuine and unfinished about himself. For the first time, she began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this wealthy stranger might actually belong in her world after all. The invitation arrived on thick cream-colored paper with Marcus's family crest embossed in gold. Alicia stared at it for a long time, reading the elegant script that requested her presence at the Thompson Industries annual gala. She had been volunteering alongside Marcus for 6 months now, and their friendship had deepened into something neither of them had expected. But this invitation represented a step into his world that she wasn't sure she was ready to take. Marcus had asked her to attend as his guest 3 weeks earlier, during one of their regular coffee conversations after volunteer work. They had fallen into the habit of stopping at the small diner near the community center, talking for hours about everything from the kids' progress to their own hopes and fears. These conversations had become the highlight of Alicia's week, though she tried not to examine too closely why that was the case. "I know it's not your scene," Marcus had said, stirring sugar into his coffee with nervous energy, "but I'd really like you to be there. My family and colleagues keep asking about my volunteer work, and I want them to meet the person who's taught me the most about what actually matters." The request had both flattered and terrified Alicia. She had never been to anything fancier than her cousin's wedding at the local parish hall. The thought of mingling with millionaires and corporate executives made her stomach churn. But the hopeful look in Marcus's eyes made it impossible to refuse immediately. She had asked for time to think about it, and now the invitation sat on her kitchen table like a beautiful, intimidating challenge. Carmen, her best friend since childhood, had strong opinions about the invitation. "Girl, you cannot be serious about going to that fancy party," she said, painting her nails bright red while Alicia tried on dresses borrowed from their friend Rosa. "What are you going to talk about with those people? Your student loan debt? Your mother's arthritis? They live on a different planet." But Alicia's younger brother Diego had a different perspective. Now 22 and working as an electrician while taking night classes, Diego had watched his sister sacrifice her own dreams to help him succeed. "Sis, you've spent your whole life taking care of other people," he said. "Maybe it's time to see what's out there for you. Besides, if this guy can handle volunteering in our neighborhood for 6 months, maybe he's different than you think." Alicia ultimately decided to attend. Though she spent 3 days shopping for an appropriate dress with money she couldn't really afford to spend, she settled on a simple black dress that Carmen declared classy enough for their world but still totally you. Standing in front of her bedroom mirror on the night of the gala, Alicia barely recognized herself. Marcus picked her up in his Mercedes, and she could see his appreciation when she opened the door. He looked handsome in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, but what struck her most was his nervous energy. For someone attending a party thrown by his own family's company, he seemed remarkably anxious. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm as they walked to the car. "But more importantly, are you ready for this circus?" The hotel ballroom where the gala was held took Alicia's breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables decorated with white orchids and gold accents. Women in designer gowns moved gracefully between groups of men in expensive suits, their conversations accompanied by the soft sounds of a string quartet. Alicia felt like she had stepped into a movie scene. Marcus's parents, Richard and Catherine Thompson, greeted them at the entrance to the ballroom. Richard was a distinguished man with silver hair and the kind of confident handshake that suggested decades of successful business deals. Catherine was elegantly dressed in navy silk, her smile warm but appraising as Marcus introduced Alicia. "So you're the young woman who's been working with Marcus at that community center," Catherine said, her tone friendly but somehow managing to make community center sound like an exotic vacation destination. "How wonderful that you dedicate your time to helping those children." Alicia recognized the subtle condescension immediately. Catherine was speaking to her the way wealthy people often spoke to those they considered worthy but inferior charity cases. But before Alicia could respond, Marcus stepped closer to her side. "Actually, Mom, Alicia doesn't just help the children. She runs most of the health and wellness programs at the center, coordinates with the local clinic to provide free medical screenings, and she's taught me more about effective community outreach than any business school ever could." The pride in Marcus's voice when he spoke about her work made Alicia's chest feel warm. She watched Catherine's expression shift slightly, a new interest flickering in her eyes. Richard, meanwhile, began asking Alicia detailed questions about the center's programs and funding challenges. To her surprise, his questions were intelligent and genuine, not the polite small talk she had expected. The evening became a series of introductions to Marcus's colleagues and family friends. Some treated Alicia with the same subtle condescension as Catherine initially had, clearly seeing her as Marcus's charitable project rather than his equal, but others surprised her with their genuine interest in her work and perspectives on urban healthcare challenges. The most uncomfortable moment came when Marcus's ex-girlfriend, Victoria Ashworth, approached their table during dinner. Victoria was exactly the kind of woman Alicia had imagined Marcus would be with. Blonde, polished, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Alicia made in 3 months. Her smile was perfectly white and completely predatory. "Marcus, darling," Victoria said, air-kissing his cheeks while completely ignoring Alicia's presence. "I heard you've been playing around with some community service. How admirable, though I hope you're not neglecting the important business of actually running your company." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Victoria, I'd like you to meet Alicia Martinez." "Alicia, this is Victoria Ashworth. Her family owns Ashworth Financial." Victoria's gaze finally shifted to Alicia, taking in her dress, her hair, her entire appearance with a quick assessment of someone used to categorizing people by their net worth. "How lovely to meet you," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "It must be so rewarding to work with underprivileged children, though I imagine it can be quite depressing at times." Before Alicia could respond, Marcus stood up from his chair. Actually, Victoria, working with the kids at the center has been one of the most inspiring experiences of my life. They've taught me more about resilience and hope than I ever learned in any boardroom. He turned to Alicia with a look of such genuine admiration that it took her breath away. And Alicia has shown me what it means to build something meaningful with your life. Victoria's smile faltered slightly, and she excused herself with obvious displeasure. As she walked away, Alicia realized that Marcus had just chosen her over someone from his own social class, someone who would have been the obvious and expected choice for someone in his position. Later that evening, as they danced to the string quartet's soft melodies, Alicia looked up into Marcus's eyes and saw something that made her heart race. This wasn't just friendship or mutual respect anymore. Somewhere between the community center and this glittering ballroom, they had both fallen into something deeper and more complicated than either had planned. "Thank you," she said softly as they swayed together. "For what? For making me feel like I belong here. For defending me to Victoria. For seeing me as more than just someone you help at the community center." Marcus's hand tightened slightly on her waist. "Alicia, you don't need my help. You're the strongest person I've ever met. And tonight, being here with you, I realize that you're not just someone I met while volunteering. You're someone I can't imagine my life without." The words hung between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross, but both were finally willing to consider. 2 weeks after the gala, Marcus found himself standing outside Alicia's apartment building for the first time. She had invited him for dinner with her family, a gesture that felt more significant than any corporate merger he had ever negotiated. The building was older, with chipped paint and a security system that buzzed loudly, but it was clean and well-maintained. Children played in the small courtyard while their mothers watched from folding chairs, speaking rapid Spanish and laughing together. Alicia met him at the door wearing jeans and a simple sweater, looking more relaxed than he had ever seen her. Her apartment was small but warm, filled with family photos, plants, and the amazing smell of homemade food. Her mother, Elena, greeted him with the kind of genuine hospitality that made him feel immediately welcome, despite the obvious language barrier. Diego, Alicia's younger brother, was more reserved. Marcus could see the protective instinct in the young man's eyes as he sized up this wealthy stranger dating his sister. Over dinner, the best Mexican food Marcus had ever tasted, Diego asked direct questions about Marcus's intentions and his commitment to the community center. There were no polite corporate pleasantries, just honest conversation about real things. "My sister has always taken care of everyone else," Diego said in careful English, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "She paid for my books when she could barely afford her own rent. She worked double shifts at the clinic to help our mother pay for knee surgery, so if you're just playing around, if this is some kind of experiment for you, you need to walk away now." The blunt protectiveness should have offended Marcus, but instead, it made him respect Diego more. This was what real family looked like. People who would fight for each other without hesitation. In his own family, conflicts were handled through lawyers and carefully worded emails. Here, love was expressed through direct confrontation and homemade meals. "I understand why you're worried," Marcus replied, setting down his fork and meeting Diego's gaze directly. "If I were in your position, I'd be asking the same questions. All I can tell you is that your sister has changed everything about how I see the world. I'm not the same person I was when I started volunteering at the center." Elena, despite speaking limited English, seemed to understand the emotional undercurrent of the conversation. She placed her hand over Marcus's and said something in Spanish that made Alicia's eyes fill with tears. "She says you have good hands," Alicia translated. "She says hands that are willing to work alongside others instead of just giving orders are hands that belong to a good heart." After dinner, Alicia walked Marcus around the neighborhood, showing him the places that had shaped her childhood. They passed the bakery where her grandmother had taught her to make conchas, the playground where she had scraped her knees learning to ride a bike, the clinic where she had first discovered her love of helping people heal. Every corner held a story, a memory that had contributed to making Alicia the woman she was today. "I never really thought about how much your surroundings shape you," Marcus admitted, as they sat on a bench in the small neighborhood park. "I grew up in houses so big that I could go days without seeing my parents. We had staff to cook our meals and drive us places and fix things when they broke. Everything was taken care of, but nothing felt personal." Alicia leaned against his shoulder, a gesture that felt both comfortable and thrilling. "It sounds lonely," she said softly. It was. I just didn't realize it until I started spending time here, with you and the kids at the center. I finally understand what home actually means. Their relationship deepened over the following months, but it wasn't without challenges. The cultural differences between their worlds created complications that neither had anticipated. When Marcus wanted to take Alicia to his country club for brunch, she felt uncomfortable with the stares and whispered comments from other members. When Alicia invited Marcus to her cousin's quinceañera, he struggled with the loud music and informal atmosphere that was so different from the structured social events he was used to. The real test came when Marcus's father asked him to attend an important business dinner with potential investors from Japan. Richard had specifically requested that Marcus bring an appropriate companion, code for someone who would impress the conservative businessmen they were trying to court. Marcus knew exactly what his father meant. And it wasn't Alicia. The investors were old-fashioned men who expected to see Marcus paired with someone from their own social class, someone whose family name they would recognize and respect. Bringing Alicia might jeopardize a deal worth millions of dollars to Thompson Industries. The night before the dinner, Marcus called Alicia to explain the situation. He tried to make it sound like a reasonable business decision, but even as he spoke the words, he could hear how hollow they sounded. "So you're saying I'm not appropriate for your business associates?" Alicia's voice was carefully controlled, but Marcus could hear the hurt underneath. "That's not what I meant. It's just that these particular investors are very traditional, and a nurse from the neighborhood isn't going to impress them the way someone like Victoria would." Marcus closed his eyes, hating himself for the conversation they were having. "Alicia, you know that's not how I see you, but it's how your world sees me. And at the end of the day, that's the world you belong to." The silence stretched between them over the phone line, filled with all the words neither of them wanted to say. Finally, Alicia spoke again, her voice tired. "You know what, Marcus? Go to your dinner. Impress your investors. But I need some time to think about whether this is really going to work between us." Marcus attended the business dinner alone, but he couldn't concentrate on the conversation with the investors. All he could think about was the resignation in Alicia's voice. The way she had said, "your world," like it was somewhere she could never belong. The deal went well. The investors were impressed with Thompson Industries' growth projections and agreed to move forward with their partnership. But Marcus felt no satisfaction in the success. 3 days passed without any communication between them. Marcus threw himself into work during the day and showed up at the community center every evening, hoping to see Alicia. But she had changed her volunteer schedule, and Mrs. Rodriguez diplomatically explained that she was taking some time to focus on her clinic work. On Friday evening, Marcus found himself sitting alone in the diner where he and Alicia usually had their coffee conversations. The waitress, who knew them both by name, asked where his pretty lady friend was. Marcus couldn't answer without feeling like his chest was caving in. He had spent his whole life making calculated decisions based on what was best for his career and his family's business. But sitting in that diner, Marcus realized that he was about to lose the most important thing that had ever happened to him, because he was too afraid to choose love over expectations. That night, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. He called his father and requested a meeting for the next morning. It was time to have a conversation that was long overdue, not just about Alicia, but about what kind of man Marcus wanted to be and what kind of life he wanted to build. The meeting with his father would determine not just his future with Thompson Industries, but his future with the woman who had taught him what it meant to love someone more than you loved your own comfort and security. Richard Thompson sat behind his mahogany desk, reading quarterly reports when Marcus knocked on his office door Saturday morning. The elder Thompson prided himself on reading people quickly and accurately. It was a skill that had served him well in business for over 30 years. But lately he had been struggling to understand his son's choices and motivations. "Dad, we need to talk," Marcus said, settling into the leather chair across from his father's desk. "About the business, about my future, and about Alicia." Richard set down his reading glasses and studied his son's face. Marcus looked tired but determined, like someone who had spent sleepless nights making a difficult decision. Over the past year, Richard had watched his son change in ways that both impressed and concerned him. Marcus had become more thoughtful and engaged with the company's operations, but he had also become less predictable and more willing to challenge family expectations. "I assume this is about the Japanese investors' dinner," Richard said carefully. The Takahashi Group was very pleased with our presentation. The partnership should be finalized within the month. I'm glad the business is doing well, Marcus replied. But I need to be honest with you about something. I almost lost the most important person in my life because I was afraid to bring her to that dinner. I made a choice based on what I thought you and the business needed, instead of what I knew was right. Richard leaned back in his chair, considering his words carefully. He had built Thompson Industries from a small contracting company into a multi-million-dollar enterprise by making hard choices and putting business considerations above personal preferences. But he had also watched his son grow into a man he increasingly respected, even when he didn't understand Marcus's decisions. Tell me about her, Richard said finally. Really tell me, not just the polite introduction from the gala. For the next hour, Marcus talked about Alicia with a passion Richard had never heard from him before. He described her dedication to her patients at the clinic, her leadership at the community center, and her commitment to her family and neighbors. He talked about how she had challenged him to think differently about success and responsibility, and how she had shown him what it meant to build something meaningful with your life. She sounds like a remarkable young woman, Richard said when Marcus finished. But son, you have to understand the realities of the world we live in. Business relationships, social connections, family expectations, these things matter. They determine opportunities and outcomes in ways that love and good intentions simply cannot. Marcus had expected this response, but hearing it still frustrated him. Dad, what's the point of all this success if it means I can't choose who I love? If it means I have to pretend to be someone I'm not in order to maintain relationships with people who don't actually care about me as a person? The question hung in the air between them, touching on issues that went far beyond Marcus's relationship with Alicia. Richard thought about his own marriage to Catherine, a union that had been as much about combining family businesses as it had been about love. He thought about the social events he attended not because he enjoyed them, but because they were expected. He thought about the careful dance of maintaining appearances that had become second nature over the decades. When I was your age, Richard said slowly, I thought I could have everything, business success and personal happiness without any compromises. Life taught me that everything comes with a price, and successful people learn to pay that price without complaining about it. But what if the price is becoming someone you don't recognize? What if the price is losing the person who makes you want to be better? Richard studied his son's face and saw something he hadn't expected. Not rebellion or defiance, but clarity. Marcus wasn't asking for permission to make poor business decisions. He was asking for the freedom to make decisions based on his own values, rather than inherited expectations. What exactly are you proposing? Richard asked. Marcus took a deep breath. I want to expand Thompson Industries into community development and affordable housing. I want to use our resources and expertise to build projects that actually help people, not just generate profits for wealthy investors. And I want to do this work with someone who understands these communities from the inside. The proposal was more thoughtful and detailed than Richard had expected. Marcus had clearly been researching the business possibilities of community-focused development, complete with financial projections and market analysis. This wasn't a young man making impulsive decisions based on romantic feelings. This was a businessman who had found a way to align his personal values with profitable opportunities. These numbers look solid, Richard admitted, reviewing Marcus's proposal. And there are significant tax advantages to this kind of community development work. But son, are you sure this woman is ready for the scrutiny and pressure that come with being connected to our family? Before Marcus could answer, Richard's assistant knocked on the door to announce that someone was there to see him. To both men's surprise, Alicia Martinez walked into the office wearing a simple blue dress and carrying a folder of papers. Her chin was raised with determination, but Marcus could see the nervousness in her eyes. Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to speak with you about your son, she said, her voice steady despite the obvious anxiety of the situation. And Marcus, I need to tell you something that I should have said days ago. Richard gestured for her to sit down, intrigued by this unexpected development. Marcus looked stunned to see her, his expression cycling between hope and concern about what she might say. First, Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that I'm not here to ask for anything or to make demands about your family's business. I'm here because I care about Marcus, and I think you deserve to know exactly who he's been spending his time with. Alicia opened her folder and spread several documents across Richard's desk. Her nursing credentials, letters of recommendation from the clinic where she worked, performance reviews from the community center, and academic transcripts from her college years. She had prepared a complete professional portfolio, presenting herself not as a charity case or a romantic distraction, but as a qualified professional with valuable skills and experience. I graduated magna cum laude from State University with a degree in nursing and a minor in public health, she said, pointing to her transcripts. I've been managing community health programs for 3 years, and I recently completed certification in healthcare administration. I speak 3 languages fluently, and I understand the healthcare needs of underserved populations better than most people with advanced degrees. Richard examined the documents with growing respect. Alicia's academic record was impressive, her professional recommendations glowing, and her community involvement extensive. This wasn't someone looking for a handout. This was someone who had built a meaningful career through hard work and determination. More importantly, Alicia continued, turning to look at Marcus, I need to tell you both something I realized after our conversation the other night. I was angry because I felt like you were ashamed of me, like I wasn't good enough for your business world. But the truth is, I was afraid too. I was afraid that if I got too involved in your life, I'd lose sight of who I am and what matters to me. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her face. Alicia, I was never ashamed of you. I was ashamed of myself for caring more about other people's opinions than about doing what was right. I know that now, she said softly. And I also know that if we're going to make this work, we both have to be willing to bridge our worlds instead of choosing sides. Your father is right that business relationships and social connections matter, but you're right that they shouldn't matter more than integrity and love. Richard found himself impressed not just by Alicia's credentials, but by her maturity and insight into the complexities of their situation. She understood the challenges without being intimidated by them, and she was proposing solutions rather than simply demanding acceptance. What exactly are you suggesting? Richard asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Alicia smiled, and for the first time since entering the office, she looked completely confident. I'm suggesting that Thompson Industries has an opportunity to become a leader in socially responsible development. Marcus has shown me his proposal for community-focused housing projects, and I think my experience in these neighborhoods could help ensure those projects actually succeed. She pulled out another set of documents, a detailed analysis of successful community development programs in other cities, complete with financial data and outcome measurements. I've been researching this for weeks, she explained. There's a growing market for businesses that can prove they're making positive social impact while maintaining profitability. Thompson Industries could position itself at the forefront of that trend. Richard studied the research with growing interest. Alicia had identified opportunities and potential pitfalls that even Marcus's business school training hadn't caught. Her insider knowledge of community needs combined with solid business analysis created a compelling case for expanding Thompson Industries' focus. You've done impressive work, Richard said finally, but I have to ask, are you prepared for what it means to be involved with the... 6 months later, the grand opening of Thompson Community Development's first project drew crowds from across the city. The converted warehouse now housed a state-of-the-art community health clinic on the ground floor, affordable family apartments on the upper floors, and a business incubator space that would help local entrepreneurs launch their own companies. Local news crews interviewed residents, city officials praised the innovative public-private partnership, and Marcus felt a sense of accomplishment, unlike anything he had experienced in traditional real estate development. Alicia stood beside him, wearing a professional blazer over her scrubs since she had come directly from her shift at the clinic. She now served as Director of Community Health Services for Thompson Community Development, a role that combined her nursing background with her new MBA coursework. The transition hadn't been easy. She was taking night classes while working full-time and learning to navigate the complex world of corporate healthcare. Partnerships. Remember when you thought I was just another rich boy playing at charity work? Marcus asked, watching children play in the new courtyard while their parents attended a health screening inside the clinic. Alicia laughed, bumping his shoulder with hers. To be fair, you did look pretty out of place that first day at the community center. Your shoes probably cost more than most people's rent. They did, Marcus admitted. But you taught me that expensive shoes don't matter much when you're wading through a flooded basement to help kids who need a safe place to do their homework. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of challenges and growth for both of them. Marcus had learned to navigate zoning laws, community meetings, and neighborhood politics with the same intensity he had once applied to corporate mergers. Alicia had discovered she had a natural talent for project management and grant writing, skills that were crucial for making their community development projects financially sustainable. Their relationship had evolved alongside their professional partnership. They had learned to blend their different worlds, finding comfortable middle ground between Marcus's penthouse and Alicia's neighborhood apartment. Marcus now spent Friday evenings playing dominoes with Alicia's uncles, while Alicia had become surprisingly adept at networking events with potential investors and municipal officials. The real test of their partnership came when Thompson Community Development faced its first major crisis. A competing development company, led by Victoria Ashworth's family firm, challenged their zoning permits for a new affordable housing project. The Ashworth Group claimed that Thompson Community Development was receiving unfair advantages due to Marcus's family connections and political influence. The challenge led to a series of public hearings where community members, city officials, and business leaders debated the merits of different development approaches. Victoria appeared at every hearing, professionally dressed and articulate, arguing that the Ashworth Group's traditional market rate housing would generate more tax revenue for the city. The Thompson project is essentially subsidized housing, disguised as community development, Victoria argued during one particularly contentious hearing. While their intentions may be admirable, the city cannot afford to sacrifice economic growth for feel-good social programs. Alicia, who had initially been intimidated by the formal hearing process, found her voice as the debate continued. She presented detailed data about the health and economic benefits of stable, affordable housing, complete with case studies from other cities and cost-benefit analyses that demonstrated long-term savings to municipal budgets. Ms. Ashworth talks about economic growth as if it's separate from community health, Alicia said during her testimony. But research consistently shows that neighborhoods with stable housing, accessible health care, and local business opportunities generate more sustainable economic activity than areas with high-priced housing that forces working families to move elsewhere. The hearings became a defining moment, not just for their project but for their relationship. Marcus watched Alicia command the room with expertise and passion, holding her own against lawyers and city planners who had initially dismissed her as an unqualified advocate. She had evolved from a community volunteer into a respected professional whose opinions carried weight in municipal planning discussions. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the City Council voted to approve Thompson Community Development's permits. The decision was based not just on the merits of their proposal, but on the overwhelming community support they had generated. Through months of neighborhood meetings and collaborative planning sessions, the victory celebration at the community center felt more meaningful than any corporate success Marcus had ever experienced. Children who would live in the new apartments played with building blocks while their parents discussed plans for the community garden and small business mentorship program. Mrs. Rodriguez, now in her 70s, wiped away tears as she thanked Marcus and Alicia for proving that development could strengthen rather than displace existing communities. "You two have shown us something important," she said, addressing the crowd gathered in the center's main room. "You've shown us that people from different backgrounds can work together to build something better than either could create alone." Later that evening, as they cleaned up after the celebration, Marcus found himself thinking about how much had changed since his first awkward day volunteering at the center. He was no longer the same person who had arrived in an expensive suit, unsure how to talk to children who lived in a different world than his own. "Penny for your thoughts?" Alicia asked, stacking folding chairs against the wall. "I was just thinking about transformation," Marcus replied. "A year ago I thought success meant impressing people who didn't really know me. Now I know it means building something that will still matter long after we're gone." Alicia stopped stacking chairs and turned to face him. "Are you having second thoughts? Because this life is harder than what you had before. The money isn't as good. The hours are longer. And you spend a lot more time dealing with bureaucracy and community politics than you ever did in traditional real estate. Marcus considered her question seriously. He earned less money than he used to, worked longer hours, and faced more complicated challenges that couldn't be solved with simple business solutions. His social circle had changed dramatically. He now spent more time with social workers and community activists than with country club members and corporate executives. "The only second thoughts I have," he said, pulling her into his arms, "are about waiting so long to find you in this work. I've never been happier or more proud of what I do every day." As they turned off the lights in the community center and walked out into the neighborhood that had become home to both of them, Marcus realized that his experiment in understanding how the other half lived had become something neither of them had expected. It had become a real life built on love and shared purpose that was richer and more satisfying than anything either of them could have created alone. The marriage proposal was coming soon. Marcus had already spoken with Diego and Elena, following traditions that were important to Alicia's family. But first, there was one more project he wanted to complete. One more way to prove that their partnership could create lasting change in the community that had brought them together. The wedding ceremony took place in the courtyard of the very community center where Marcus and Alicia had first met. 2 years after that awkward introduction, the space had been transformed into something beautiful. String lights overhead, flowers donated by local businesses, and chairs borrowed from churches throughout the neighborhood. It was exactly the kind of celebration both families could embrace, blending Marcus's resources with Alicia's community connections to create something uniquely their own. Elena Martinez walked her daughter down the aisle, a decision that honored both tradition and the reality of their family structure. Alicia wore her grandmother's pearl necklace with a simple white dress that she had chosen herself, preferring elegance over extravagance. Marcus waited at the makeshift altar, flanked by Diego as his best man and his father, Richard, who had surprised everyone by requesting to serve as an officiant after getting ordained online specifically for the occasion. The guest list reflected the life they had built together. Children from the community center sat next to board members from Thompson Industries, while Alicia's nursing colleagues mingled with Marcus's business associates. Carmen served as maid of honor, wearing the bright purple dress she had declared perfect for showing these fancy people how we celebrate in the neighborhood. "When I first met Alicia," Marcus said during his vows, "I thought I was volunteering to help her community. I didn't realize she was going to save me from a life that looked successful from the outside but felt empty on the inside. She taught me that real wealth isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you build with the people you love." Alicia's vows were equally heartfelt but characteristically practical. "Marcus, you showed me that good intentions backed by real resources can create changes that good intentions alone never could. You proved that love isn't about finding someone from your own world. It's about building a new world together that's better than either of you could create alone." The reception continued late into the evening, with music that ranged from classical pieces for Richard's business associates to cumbia that got Elena and her sisters dancing with enthusiasm that surprised the younger generation. Children who had grown up in the after-school program served as unofficial hosts, proudly explaining to guests how the community center had brought the bride and groom together. 3 years later, Marcus and Alicia stood in the same courtyard, now watching their own daughter Sophia take her first wobbling steps across the playground they had helped design. Thompson Community Development had expanded to include 5 housing projects, 2 health clinics, and a small business incubator that had launched over 40 local enterprises. Alicia had completed her MBA and was being courted by several major healthcare organizations, while Marcus had been elected to the city council on a platform of sustainable community development. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't decided to prove David wrong about living in a bubble?" Alicia asked, adjusting Sophia's sun hat while keeping one eye on the toddler's determined exploration of the sandbox. Marcus considered the question while watching their daughter interact with children from the neighborhood, kids whose families now lived in Thompson Community Development housing, received care at their clinics, or worked for businesses launched in their incubator program. Sophia was growing up bilingual and bicultural, equally comfortable at formal dinner parties and neighborhood barbecues. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted, But I don't think it was really about proving David wrong. I think I was looking for something real, something that mattered. I just didn't know what it looked like until I found it here, with you. The community center had evolved as well. Mrs. Rodriguez had retired, and Diego now served as the director, while completing his master's degree in social work. The after-school program had expanded to include college prep courses and career counseling, with several graduates going on to 4-year universities on scholarships partially funded by Thompson Industries. Jamal, the 8-year-old who had struggled with homework during Marcus's first week's volunteering, was now 15 and working as a junior counselor at the center while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. Maria had graduated high school as valedictorian and was studying pre-med at the state university, planning to return to the neighborhood as a doctor. These success stories were no longer unusual. They had become the expected outcome of a support system that combined community caring with adequate resources. "Mama, Papa, watch," Sophia called out, having mastered the art of climbing the small slide. At 2 years old, she already showed signs of inheriting both parents' determination and stubbornness. As they applauded their daughter's achievement, Marcus reflected on how his definition of success had completely transformed. He now measured accomplishments by the number of families housed, children educated, and businesses launched rather than by profit margins and stock prices. Thompson Industries continued to thrive financially, but their community development division had become the part of the business that generated the most pride and satisfaction. "I got a call from the mayor's office today," Alicia said, settling onto the bench beside him while Sophia continued her playground adventures. "They want us to present our housing model to the state legislature. Apparently, 3 other cities are interested in replicating what we've done here." Marcus smiled, remembering when their first project had seemed impossibly ambitious. Now they were being asked to help other communities develop similar programs. "Are you interested?" "Only if we can stay based here," Alicia replied. "This neighborhood, these people, this community, this is our home. I don't want to become consultants who parachute into other places with solutions. I want to be neighbors who share what we've learned with friends who are facing similar challenges." That evening, as they tucked Sophia into her crib in the apartment they had bought just 3 blocks from the community center, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had started as a marriage experiment, a wealthy man trying to prove he could connect with people from different backgrounds, had become the foundation for a life neither of them could have imagined alone. The experimental phase of their relationship had ended long ago, replaced by the daily reality of building a marriage, raising a child, and managing a business that served their community. They faced the same challenges as any couple: disagreements about money, stress over work-life balance, and occasional frustration with each other's stubborn streaks. But they also had something that many couples never find: a shared sense of purpose that made their individual efforts more meaningful. "Do you think Sophia will want to take over the family business someday?" Alicia asked, turning off the bedroom light and joining Marcus on the small balcony that overlooked their neighborhood. Marcus watched the evening activities below: teenagers playing basketball under the streetlights, families sitting on stoops sharing dinner and conversation, elderly residents tending small gardens in the courtyard spaces they had helped design. This was the world their daughter was growing up in, where business success was measured by community impact and wealth was defined by the relationships you built with your neighbors. "I hope she'll want to build something meaningful with her life," he said, putting his arm around his wife. "Whether that's continuing our work or creating something entirely new. The important thing is that she grows up knowing that success means making life better for other people, not just accumulating things for yourself." As they stood together watching their neighborhood settle into evening quiet, Marcus realized that the marriage experiment had succeeded beyond his wildest expectations. Not because he had proven he could connect with people from different backgrounds, but because he had discovered that love and partnership could transform not just individual lives, but entire communities when people were willing to bridge their differences and work toward shared goals. The streets below held their history: the community center where they had met, the diner where they had shared countless conversations, the clinic where Alicia still worked part-time, and the housing projects where families were building stable, hopeful futures. It was a neighborhood where wealth had truly met the streets, not as a charitable gesture or business experiment, but as the foundation for a real life built on love, respect, and the belief that everyone deserves the chance to thrive.